Hello everyone, this is Kenneth Brenny from Cambridge and welcome back to the channel. So in this series of videos, you are learning Python, and this is specifically SENG 207 Programming for Engineers, a course taught at the University of Ghana. So if you have been following along, we have this particular structure we have been following, and this has been put together like the chapters of a book. So currently we are on Python classes, which is chapter 18, and this Python classes video or object-oriented programming has been broken down into series of videos, and I think this is about the fourth video where we have created this class.py file. We are experimenting with our baking pan over here. Now in this particular video, we are going to look at two things. First of all, we are going to look at class variables, and we are also going to look at methods in here. So I'm going to collapse this so that we have a much wider slate in here. Now let me show you two things quickly. Let's say we have, and let me just show this up over here. So let's say we have a variable called school, and school is going to be equal to University of Ghana. This we have done, or we have looked at this over and over again. So now I'll save this, and let me shrink this up a little bit. I just want us to have an instance where we see everything we are typing. Now let me clear everything in here, and also clear bread 2. And now if I'm to print out the value of the variable school that I have over here, when I save this and run this, we do get University of Ghana. Now this becomes a global variable. It can be accessed in anywhere of our code or any part of our code. Now let's have another instance where we have a variable, and the name of the variable is department, and in here I'm going to say food process engineering. So the name of the department, and of course one of the departments I teach, is food process engineering department. Good. Now if I'm to apply the same principle over here and try to print out the department just as I have over here, clearly we get a sense of the fact that there's going to be an error. So now currently when I hover around this, we do get something like department is not defined. No problem. Now let's try printing this out, and we get that same problem, a name error which says department is not defined. Now maybe I made a mistake whilst typing the name, so I'll just come and do a Ctrl+C, copy this, and rather paste it over here, which was eventually the same thing. I ran this and there's still a problem over here. So now what we have over here, this variable is a class variable. It's a class variable because it is defined within the scope of this baking pan class. So it is only going to be accessible within the baking pan class or objects. So now this is what I mean. Now if you want to access department, there are two ways of accessing department. And one, we either access it through the class or through the object. So through the class, then we know that, okay, then through baking pan, we can access this department. Then also through the objects like bread1, we can access this department. And once again, if it is through the instance, then it can either be bread1 or self. We are going to look at an instance where we can access this through self. But now let's start with accessing it through the class as we have over here. So currently I can now do something like baking pan.department this way. Now I would want to wrap this up in a print function, and now when I save this and run this, I do get printed out food process engineering. So I'm accessing this class variable from the class. So when I do the name of the class dot, like I said, the dot operator is almost like we going into it. So we want to go into the baking pan class, and now when we go into it, we have this department variable in here. Now the other thing I said is we can also access it through the instance, and in this case the object, and the instance over here is either bread1, which we have defined over here, or self. Self is going to come later, but now let's look at bread1. Now I can do bread1, and whenever I do a dot, that means I'm going into it, and you could see that I also have department showing up over here in addition to flour, special ingredients, and sugar. So now when I do this, save this and run this, we do get same results. So now the question is, okay, then if I said we can also look at it from self, then why then don't we bring self over here? Now, when I do this, it is not going to work. Clearly, it tells us that self is not defined. And we are going to see an instance where we are going to utilize self to have access to our class variables. All right. So now let me just clear this off, and let me also clear this. And let's use a more realistic example. So over here, I'm going to have a class variable, and I'm going to call this unit price. So unit price, I'm going to set unit price to 5. So 5 Ghana cedis. So we are going to write two methods over here. So we have our unit price over here. And what I want to do now is I want to define two methods. And once again, the method is going to be within the scope of this baking pan class. So the first one is I'm going to have a method called bread_name. And this is the name of the function or the method. I'll bring in a parenthesis. And the first thing I need to pass in over here is self. Self is more or less compulsory because we need to pass in the instance of the class, in which case we are representing as self over here. And now I just want to return something in a formatted string. And this is where I said we can use self to also access some things over here. So for now, let's say I want to access the unit price over here. I can now bring this placeholder and I can say self dot, and I can have access to unit price over here. So currently I'm using this self, which within the scope of this baking pan class is the instance. It does not really matter because within our code, we don't know the name of the object yet as at the time you are writing this. So we can use self to represent the instance. It is only when we give it a name over here, which can be anything, bread 20, bread 35, that now we can say, okay, now bread dot. But as it stands within here, we just have to use self. So self is now going to travel through everything over here and it's going to check, are there any attributes over here that matches this name? No. As you can see, this is unit price. So it goes through this and see that, okay, there's a class variable over here. So currently, if I'm to do, for instance, bread 1, and I do a dot, you can see that I have this unit price, but then I also have this bread name we see, or you see me have over here. And now when I do this and wrap everything up in a print function, remember this is returning, so at least we need to print it out over here. And something interesting is going to happen. Now when I run this, we get this bound method, baking pan dot bread name of whatever thing we have over here. Now what is happening? Now this is showing up simply because we haven't called this method. Remember, this is a method. This is not just an attribute, okay? Bread name is a method. And the way we call method or functions is we bring this parenthesis over here. So now when we do this, we are calling it. So when I run this, we do get 5 over here. But for the purpose of this bread name, I just don't want to show the unit price. We are going to use this unit price to do a calculation. But I just wanted to show you where we use self to grab the class variable. So instead of bringing unit price over here, I want to have an instance where the special ingredient is going to form part of the name of the bread. So for instance, if the special ingredient is wheat, I want to have the name printing out as wheat bread. If it is butter, then butter bread, so on and so forth. So in order to also grab an attribute over here, I can simply do, for instance, self dot, and when I do dot, I can see that I have special ingredients over here. So I'll select special ingredients. And remember, what we have over here, special ingredient, is just an attribute. It's just like we doing flour is equal to soft, or special ingredient is equal to wheat. But in the case of what we have over here, we are doing bread.1 because once again, this is object oriented. Everything is centered around or aligned or positioned around the object. So we can do this. And now I just want to have something like this over here. So clearly when we read this, we do see self dot the special ingredient, which is going to be grabbed from the parameter or the argument you are going to set up over here. Is going to enter into this parameter, and the assignment is going to happen over here. And now when I do self.special ingredients, it's going to pick this up as wheat bread. So now when I save this and run this, we do get wheat bread over here. This a more classical or nice example. So now let's say I have bread 2, and this bread 2 is also coming in from my baking pan class. And for the bread, this is going to be a hard flour. The sugar quantity is going to be 10, and over here I'm going to have coconuts as the special ingredient. So now if I'm to come in here and print out what I have as bread 2 dot bread name, and now save this and run this, we do get wheat bread from the first one that we are printing over here from bread 1. Then we also get coconut bread from line 14, where we are printing from bread 2. So everything is looking good. So now we know what these class variables are. We can access a class variable from either the name of the class or the instance. Within the confines of our code over here, the instance itself, it is only when we create an object, then it can assume the name of the object. But technically, self and the object name are doing the same things. Now let me just clear everything I have over here, and now I want to create a new method. And when I say a new method, it's basically a new function under baking pan. So I'm going to call this total_price. Now you see me do some of these things over here, and this is more or less a generic way of writing programs. Now remember I said in most cases you have your class names in capital letters, or maybe in these Pascal notations over here, and your methods are going to be something like this, something small letters, or maybe in a snake case notation. So over here, once again, because there's a method, you always have to pass in self. Now I'm going to show you if we decide to omit self, and let me just comment what I have over here, or let me just clear this first. If you decide to omit self, and over here within bread name, okay, so let's go back to reprinting, for instance, bread 1 dot bread name, we call it this way, and now when I run this, we do get this. Now if you omit self over here and run this, we get a problem. It says the baking pan dot bread underscore name takes 0 positional arguments, but 1 was given. So now the question is, when we are talking about positional arguments, it goes within when we are calling the method or the function. Currently nothing was provided over here, but based on the error I'm receiving, it says 1 was given. So which one are we talking about? Now 1 was given because the moment you created this bread object, we passed in this self over here, and for which reason it always has to appear everywhere we create an instance. So now when we do this, everything is looking good. Now let's create the new method, and this method is going to be total_price. And once again, I'll pass in self over here. Then I'll say quantity. So quantity is a new parameter I'm introducing over here. Then I'm going to call this total is going to be equal to. So here we are going to perform a simple arithmetic operation. So whichever quantity the user will input, let's say 10. If the quantity is 10, then the unit price will be multiplied by the quantity, and that will form the total price. Now, because this quantity is within the scope of this method, we can simply do quantity, and I'll do times. And because I want to grab this unit price, I can simply do something like self dot, and now I have access to the unit price variable, which is a class variable over here. So in here, I can now do a return of, and I'll put this in a formatted string. I'll bring this up over here, and I'll say total. So total is now being used over here, and I'm going to say the total price is equal to what I have over here. And to make things look a little bit nice, let me say Ghana cedis, and this is the currency we spend here in Ghana. So we have a new method, which is the total price. So now we have bread 1. Let me just clear this up over here. Now let's try and utilize the total price method over here. So now when I do bread 1 dots, once again I have access to this total price. And now when I do this, it is now requiring of me to pass in quantity, because quantity is a parameter over here. Now assuming I don't pass anything in there, when I run this, it is telling me that I'm missing one required positional argument, which is quantity. So definitely I need to pass in quantity over here. So let's say I pass in 10. So this 10 will go into quantity, and we are now going to see 10 times the unit price, which we have put out static over here as 5. So now when I run this, that arithmetic operation applies over here, and now we are getting total price is equal to 50 Ghana cedis. Let me just put up a space over here. Let me run this again. We get total price is equal to 50 Ghana cedis showing up over here. So this is looking good. One of the things I would also want to point out is, now instead of using self over here, especially with the class variable, which we have as baking pan, we can also use the class name to access it. And this is what I mean. We can say baking pan, and whenever we do a dot, if it is possible, it is actually going to give you those options over here. So we have baking pan over here. So baking pan dot unit price. And now when I run this, the same logic applies over here. And indeed, if the quantity I pass in over here is, for instance, 5, then it's going to be 5 times 5, which is going to yield 25 Ghana cedis. And most often than not, I will recommend you use self over here, because self is the instance of the class. Now, one of the other things I would want to also point out is I would want us to do a little bit of formatting over here. So over here, currently you see that we see total price is equal to 25 Ghana cedis. This is not descriptive to my liking. I want us to have something like the total price of, let's say, 5 coconut bread or 5 wheat bread, depending on the type of bread, is whichever calculation that has been performed over here. So I can say total price of, and in here I can bring in a placeholder, passing quantity, because this quantity is within the scope over here. I can simply get it. So this is going to read something like, and currently we have 5 over here. So when I run this, we get total price of 5. Now I want us to have 5 coconut bread. So now to have coconut bread, or to have whichever bread, we have this bread name over here. And once again, let me bring out another placeholder over here. Now we can also use self to access a method within this class. So, and I can now do self dot bread name. And now I'll see if there's something interesting is going to happen. And I know by now some of you are even catching some of the possible errors I'm showing up over here. So now when I run this, we get the total price of whatever long thing we have over here is equal to 25 Ghana cedis. Now intuitively, what do you think is happening over here? Now what is happening here is happening so because this is a method. Bread name we have over here is a method. So if we are calling it, we need to bring in a parenthesis this way. So now we see something like exactly what you wanted to see. The total price of 5 wheat bread is equal to 25 Ghana cedis. Now let's do something for coconut bread, and I would want us to print bread 2, which is coconut bread dot the total price, and let's say I'm buying 30, so the quantity is 30 over here. So now when I run this, I also get the total price of 30 coconut bread is equal to 150 Ghana cedis. So everything is looking good. Okay, so this is going to be the end of this video. And in the other videos, definitely this is not going to be the end of classes. We are definitely going to touch on a more practical example of classes in the next chapter, which is chapter 19, where we are going to build a student MIS system. So let me just give you a sneak peek into whatever thing we are going to do. So in here, and I'm reading from line 2, in this code implementation of OOP in Python, we shall implement an object-oriented database for the UG, which is the University of Ghana Student MIS. So over here, we are going to create a person, and we are going to create an object and do some few things over here. And in here, we're also going to bring out some functionality where the students can add a course or drop a course, print all courses, to mimic a real world use case of activities of adding a course, deleting a course, and printing registered courses, respectively. A student will perform on the student MIS. And finally, we are going to touch on magic methods and stuff like that. And once again, object-oriented programming is going to form the fundamentals of most of the logic we are going to write as a developer or as an engineer learning programming. So please pay attention, and whenever you don't get anything, just go back to the video and just take it from first principle. Watch the video, practice as you watch the videos, code alongside, come up with your own examples, write your own methods, and try and see the errors you may get or the interesting things you may write out of your own ingenuity. So this is going to be the end of this video. Now, if you find value in the content I'm putting out over here, kindly support my work by subscribing to the Cambro Tech channel. Also, don't forget to hit on the notification button so that anytime I release a video, you'll be duly notified. Share this video with friends and family who find this content very useful. At Cambro Tech, we say learn programming. You can do it. Bye bye, and catch you in the next video.